When planning and designing your own graffiti letters, there are a few things that you need to think about. For example, questions like what stylization of specific letters we want to do for our piece. Stylizing in our sketchbook is a lot different than spray painting. The layers and the way you add your lines and details would be different if you were spray painting than if you were to draw. There are some graffiti terms that you do need to know though before beginning, so let's get started. The sketch. Most graffiti artists carry a sketchbook with them so that they can put down ideas. It's important to take the time to do a bit of research on your own, going on the internet to find different styles and practicing letter fonts. Here are some examples of different graffiti stylizations. Some are simplified, and some are a lot more elaborate. Adding interesting elements like arrows or background designs, highlights, and decals within can also create interest. When starting your sketches, you want to start with the letter, start to build on that letter, and then add your designs after. When you roughly know what your sketching idea is going to be, you're going to be building your construction lines. These are lines that form the guidelines, and they should be drawn lightly. This is so that you can erase it and add to it as you go. Here's an example of the outline of the letters rock. This is the beginning construction of the actual word. You can begin stylization by adding interesting elements and maybe overlapping a bit. Tweak those letters, angle, and change the size. Your overlaps can become stronger. There could be more roundness to your letters. You can go in any direction. And finally, add arrows, chips, and designs to your piece as practice. The next term is shadows. This is for 3D depth. Majority of graffiti artists actually show shadows within their work. This gives all of their work a little bit more interest. You can have your shadow come from one particular side, like on the left or right. It can be below, down on the bottom. It could be in your corners of your letters, or it can have two different sections or spots, either on the bottom or the left, or bottom and right, to create that depth. Imagine there's a light source that hits your piece from one particular angle. That's going to cast a shadow to the other side. It's important to be consistent though, because your angles should all kind of connect and be the same as your piece is viewed and read from left to right. This particular graffiti piece is a bit confusing because its shadow is coming from different sides. So we have one on the top right and on the bottom right. This 3D shadow is a lot more consistent. It's happening on the lower, bottom, right, and left of the piece. The artist also has included a little bit of detail in that shadow to create more interest, and it really makes it pop. This white shadow is consistent throughout this piece. It looks great because it has the same depth and it also has a little bit of detail shading within the actual shadow itself. Okay, let's do some practicing in our sketchbooks. Starting with the letter A in the alphabet, we will draw the main core construction line of the center and the construction lines around it. You can stylize these however you want. Now imagine the light source is coming from the top left corner of the page. This means we will have our 3D shadow on the right-hand side. I find all the points on the right side of my edges. To make this easier for you to see, I will place a small dot on those points. Now taking the same line length and angle, I add lines at all those points going in the same direction. Once I'm done, all I have to do is connect the points around the actual shape of what I've designed for the construction lines. You can also have fun adding other elements to really make the detailing and the decals within. Let's try a different stylization with the letter B in the alphabet. This time I want this letter to look more rounded and bubbly. I'm going to change the light source though for this one and have it coming from the top right. This will change where the 3D shadow will show. I'm just having a little bit of fun of adding little extra details as well. Once you have a good grasp on adding shadows, you can move to figuring out a whole alphabet in one particular style. I draw out my letters and give them enough space to play around with the look I'm going for. Here, I've set up my alphabet letters from A to G. I can add little chips and arrows and different types of edging to my construction lines to see how it will turn out. I draw a little bit lighter in the beginning so that I can erase. These are just for practice. Now I'm going to decide where my light source is coming from. In this case, it's on the top left corner. I will build my shadow around it, and I will include the shadow on the chips and edges of each of the arrows. I can erase the center construction line when I feel like my design is more complete. If I want, I can add other elements to my piece at this time, just for practice. Now, I want to show you a different stylization, a little bit more rounded edges with the light source coming from the other end. You can see that the two looks from H to N are completely different than the ones that I stylized from A to G. Because we're practicing in our sketchbooks, this is a great time to do your little edits, change and tweak things, get the angles and the lines that you like so that you're comfortable with what it looks like. Here's another example of how you can do an O. I'm going to change the angle of my S in the inner line and have it kind of close up in the edges on the sides. And maybe try this Q in a really weird, unique, kind of looks a little bit more sloppy, but it's interesting. Then you're going to need to figure out what colors. This term is called the fill. It includes fades and blends. This is filling the inside of your design with colors, and it can be ombre from light to dark or dark to light, but you want to include lights, darks, and the detailed decals that can happen within your piece. The next term is called inner outlines. This goes on top of your fill and forms your letters. Trying to be crisp and clean with these lines is very important. Here are some examples of different stylized fill and outlines. Notice how some of the lines for the inner outlines are both thick and thin. Another term you should know is called the outer outline. And the outer outline is the key line, or what we would call the aura. And this goes all around your whole border of your letter, separating your piece from the background. It helps to have contrasting colors and fill from the inside to the outer line so that it really stands out. You can have as many outer lines as you want. Here you can see in this piece there's a white outline and also a blue outline. Changing up the thickness can also make it really interesting and stand out from the background. The next important term to know is called the shine or shines. These are the highlights. Usually they're done in white or a brighter color. They build form and depth so your piece doesn't look as flat. You can have shines or highlights within the fill of your piece, but you can also highlight the shadow. Shines can also be added to your design as creative elements to help decorate your letters. And finally, the background. Well, the background can be busy or simplified, depending on your own choice and creativity. Some of these backgrounds are extremely busy and very detailed with lots of color. Designing a contrasting background from your actual letters and fill will really help your words stand out. Thinking about cold versus warm colors or complementary colors on the color wheel are going to help you in this area. Alright, well now you understand the graffiti terms like fills, using fades and blends, inner and outer outlines or auras, shadows, shines and highlights, and backgrounds. So let's get planning in our sketchbooks and start exploring some of these ideas. Here are a few stylized sketchbook pieces of what can be done as your starting sketch. Don't forget to utilize the internet as a great source for ideas and inspiration.